Hi, and welcome to the Reclamation Project podcast. We are so glad that you're here, that you're listening, and hopefully that you're a part of the conversation. Today, we are going to continue our conversation and our podcast series on attitude adjustments. What we're really trying to do here is really understand how we can take positive steps, biblical principles, and change our attitude on a day in, day out basis that helps us become more Christ-like, that helps us become more kingdom-minded. And for some of you, you may not have a foundation of faith in your background. You may not have a church background, and that's okay. For us, I think, and for you, this is something that is transferable and something that you can hear and hopefully take these principles and apply them to your life and be better for it. So please continue to listen and continue to hear the podcast and listen to it in an open mind, with an open mind, and hopefully apply these principles as well. But for those of us who are faith-based, who are Christians and Christ followers, these are principles that come from the Bible and that sometimes we do not adhere to or think about on a day in, day out basis. Our reality and the things around us become more of an influence than and more of a mindset than this kingdom mindset that we're seeking out. So today what we're doing is we're looking at how do we become more meek? And for some of you, you have no clue what that word means. For me, reading it the first time years ago, I said, meek, is that a typo? Did they mean to say weak?
It rhymes.
Because it rhymes and it sounds good. And I just started thinking, what is this? What does meekness mean? And you know what? It's a great virtue, and I think it's important to define, and it's a great principle, and it's how Christ wants us to live. He talks about it in Matthew about us being meek. And so therefore, that's what we're going to discuss today is how do we become more meek in our lifestyle? How do we become more meek in the way that we live? And what the heck is meek?
Yeah. You know, we mentioned it in last week's podcast when we talked about those things out of Colossians we were supposed to put on, and that was one of the things we're to put on. You know, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, or meekness. That was one of the things you put on when you're trying to live a kingdom lifestyle.
Yeah, and so what is meek? That's the first place to start. What does it mean to be meek? A couple of the definitions that we came up with this morning as we were preparing for this is meekness is humility. Meekness is being vulnerable. Meekness is
being transparent.
Meekness is serving others, and to a certain extent being submissive of others, putting others before yourself. And those are great things to aspire to be. I think they're great for you to aspire for your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend to be. It's great for you to aspire for your kids to be like, for their heroes to be like. We're talking, and there's a lot of heroes out there today that don't subscribe to being humble, to being meek. There's a false humility to a certain extent.
Yeah,
and we should aspire for ourselves to put on this meekness, and for the people that we're around to put on this meekness and to permeate the culture with this meekness so that other people put it on. And so we're going to discuss what that looks like and how that feels, and really places that we can do that.
You know, as to your point of wondering as a youngster, did that mean weakness? To be transparent or vulnerable in front of someone, that takes a strong person.
Oh, yeah.
In order to open up and show who you really are, your hurts and your pains and your inconsistencies and your flaws, and to be humble. Really, pride is the major enemy of the Christian walk. So to be humble is not a weak person. Narcissism is probably grown more than any other anti-virtue in our country, as you were just attesting to. And he's called us to do just the opposite. It's funny how he seems to do, he calls us to things that are opposite of social norms, which again, a weak person might not be able to do. It takes a strong person to be meek.
Yeah, and you say narcissism, right? Narcissism is something that, as you look over the internet, I think one of the reasons it's becoming such a huge thing is because you are supposed to build your brand.
Yeah.
You're supposed to build up who you are. Yeah. You're supposed to a certain extent, be boastful about yourself.
The new thing is to be the expert.
To be the expert, to be the guru.
Yeah.
You know, and to do those things, you have to promote yourself. You have to sell yourself.
Yeah.
You know, selling yourself is one of the hardest things to do, and remain meek.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's possible.
It is, but it's easy to get wrapped up in yourself when you're constantly talking about yourself.
Yeah.
That was one of my fears when we started this podcast, is we're going to be using our conversations and things that we've been through, and it can really look like we're trying to build ourselves up.
We're just sitting around talking about ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's easy to get caught up on that.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the viewers that you see, the people that you see responding and things like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain extent that we have to keep ourselves meek in order to, you know, not become narcissistic.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem, because I think everything today is built around how big can you build yourself up, and how great can you be, and how big can you build this brand, rather than, as Jesus says, you know, it's the least of these that are going to inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned about not just for ourselves, but for spouses and children. Imagine the heroes, the narcissistic heroes our kids look up to today, and get a false idea of what life is, of what humanity is, of what, you know, social things are. It's hard to teach a kid to go against the grain.
Yeah, can you say Kardashians?
I can. I just don't want to.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, when there's this false sense of what life is about, and then your kids see it, it's. I mean,
that becomes their worldview then, something to aspire to, and you're aspiring to someone who's famous for actually doing nothing,
right?
Except taking off your clothes and.
Well, and when we started this podcast, that was the first time I ever got on Instagram. And oh my gosh, Instagram. Can people be more full of themselves?
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
I thought Facebook was bad. Instagram is just like, boom, take it to another level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's huge, and you want your kids to, and your spouse and the people around you that you have influence over, to aspire to so much more than that, and you want them to be. To have this characteristic and this principle ingrained in them, so they don't become that.
Yeah. And funny, the irony of the switching of words. So someone today who would seem strong because they're a narcissist is actually weak.
Yeah.
You know, and so someone who Scripture says is meek is actually strong. It shouldn't surprise us that what people say is good is evil, and what evil is good. Bible already tells us that we live, really, the kingdom of God is an upside-down kingdom, really.
It's like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
upside down.
Upside down. Yeah.
Because
that was our first reference that wasn't Friends or How I Met Your Mother, so that was pretty exciting. Where was I today at 10?
Yeah, exactly right. But no, I actually and I told you about it, is I woke up in the middle of the night the other night and started writing something that started up with, I feel like I'm in the upside down. Mm-hmm. And I might share that in the future, but that's sometimes how this life feels, is you're in the upside down.
Yeah.
Because what you should aspire to be, it looks weak, and what you should,
it's not rewarded.
And it's not rewarded. And what is rewarded is this selfishness and this nastiness. And I mean, you said some of the people that are most narcissistic are weak. Kanye West.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, he's all
who's
actually
over the place. Related to the Kardashians, too, for those of you who follow E! News. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at Kanye West the other day, and I'm just like, dude, this guy's life is spiraling out of control, and he is the most narcissistic guy, one of the most narcissistic people that I see on TV anymore. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow. It's upside down. It's upside down. The weak are the people who are not rewarded, and the meek are the people who are not rewarded, and the people who are narcissistic and aspire to be all these things that are completely upside down biblically are the people who are looked upon as the moral foundation of this country nowadays.
Yeah, that's almost nauseating to hear it actually put into a sentence like that.
It's nauseating to say, too.
One of the words that we threw out under the category of meekness is transparency, which really is a big word and takes a strong person to do. Because like we said in a past podcast, your trials and your successes really aren't about you.
Yeah.
Your goals that are met are not about reaching your goals, are about who you're becoming. So your experiences are really for other people too. I was reading in my daily devotions, which I don't do daily, which I should call them sporadic devotions, if I'm going to be transparent.
Yeah. Me too.
I was reading about Jesus when he brought Lazarus from the tomb, and there was an interesting point. Like again, when you continually try to know God, he's new every day, because as I grow, I see a different side of him. I get a closer angle, and so you never finish knowing him. So I was reading that where he calls out Lazarus' name, and then he says, "Come on out." And then his sister says, "But Jesus." That's the only time I like to quote the King James, because she says, "He stinketh." I'm like, what a great word that is, stinketh. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why would he call him out? Because I would bet Lazarus would want him to come in. I don't want to show people how bad I stink, how dirty I am, what decay looks like, possibly. But I think, real meekness and strength comes when you come out and you show you. That's what transparency is. Anyone can always brag about their successes, but I think meekness talks about your failures in a way that helps someone else maybe prevent walking down that path.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's, I talked in a couple podcasts ago, I said, hey, Katie and I, one of the things that we decided a long time ago, and I think it was unsaid, was being completely truthful with each other. That's hard. Even as we're doing these podcasts, there's certain things I want to interject and speak on from life experience, but I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, because I'm still struggling with it, or I don't know if I want my parents to hear it who are listening, who may listen to this one. I don't, what perception is it going to bring? And some things I've said that I haven't felt entirely comfortable with, and some things I haven't, because I'm just like, I can't be that vulnerable at this point.
Yeah.
I had someone send me a message the other day, hey, are you guys going to talk on this subject? And I'm like, I still struggle with that subject. How can I speak to it?
Yeah.
I need to be clean before I talk about that.
Yep.
And so being vulnerable is just a hard thing. I mean, being vulnerable in all situations. I mean, one of the things that I did, I took over my department probably about 7 years ago. And one of the things I said when I took over my department was, I'm just going to be completely transparent. Good, bad, indifferent. If it makes me look like I'm the worst manager in the world, if it makes me look like I'm taking initiative, I don't care. I'm just going to tell it how it is. And that has gotten me in trouble at times, being transparent, being vulnerable. But it's something I think I need to do in order to communicate fully to the people around me what's going on, so that they know how to manage their clients, et cetera. Is that I have to be truthful, and sometimes that comes with vulnerability.
Yep.
Sometimes it comes with humility.
Yep.
And sometimes it absolutely sucks.
Yeah. And it's all wrapped in honesty too, based on your intention. If I have to be that way with somebody, it's because the intentions are good. When I'm transparent with someone and I'll show you my faults, it's both to say, A, here I am, I'm not perfect, and B, I need your help to get through this. And C, it's a cautionary tale, don't go this way.
Yeah. Well, and that's, not to be narcissistic, I mean, that's the times where I try to help people. And that's why I went into, for a brief time went into ministry, was I was like, I've messed up in my life. I want to make sure that other people don't go through the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it always came across that way, but that's what I wanted why I wanted to help people. And as we talked about in our purpose,
yes.
what was it? Purpose, contentment,
And happiness.
And happiness.
Yeah.
Podcast, which was, I think, our second or third podcast, if you want to look it up. But my purpose that I found is I want to help people. And most of the reason why I want to help people is because I just want them to be better versions of themselves. But the other is I don't want them to be the version of themselves that looks like me.
Yep.
Because I've screwed up so much in my life.
Yep.
And I don't want them to have to go through that heartache. Same thing with my kids. I don't want them to have to go through the same heartache that I've gone through. And as I think about what they're going to go through, I'm just like, please don't go down this road. Please don't go down this road, because
which makes it, you have to be selective in what you share with your children.
Yeah.
Because they'll look at you and, well, you made it all right, Dad.
Well, and as Katie and I have talked about how I'm going to talk to our kids about things, it's like, she wants me to be transparent. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to fully be transparent with our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to let them know, but at the same time, I don't know if I want to let them know everything.
Yeah.
So with that, there's transparency and there's vulnerability, but
which, as they get older, will know that my dad's a strong man because he did that.
Hopefully they don't think I'm a jack. I censored myself there. A jerk is what.
We have a 7-second delay button here for our.
I started saying the word I want to say, but I'll go with jerk. I'm working on that whole unwholesome talk thing that we talked about a couple podcasts ago. Trying to filter.
Filters.
But anyways, no. But meekness is a great virtue to really seek out. How do we do that more though? How do we become more meek? And becoming meek, I think, has a connotation to it where when it's intentional, it almost seems like it's not meek.
Yeah.
Yeah. But how do we flesh out meekness?
Well, that's a great question. I think you flesh out everything first by who you surround yourself with. Because if you're going to do something that's falsely meek, I'm going to call you on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you flesh it out by surrounding yourself with people who keep you in the path to be honest and transparent. I think you have to probably do an inventory of all the areas that you are narcissistic, that you are. You find all the opposite terms of the ones we talked about, and find out what are those places in my life where I exhibit narcissism, and I'm not humble, I'm braggadocious, and I'm not transparent, I'm closed off and phony. And so I think if you identify those and we start to have an attitude adjustment about those, you're probably going to be more of the time starting to flesh out what meekness would look like.
Well, and what might be meek in that area is also not only doing that yourself, but being humble and transparent enough to have those closest around you be able to do that, whether it be a spouse or a friend or, a close-knit group of friends. We talked about it a few podcasts ago. I think it was during our talking about being single, is that it's best to have a group of friends around you that have your best interests at heart, that know you the best, and that you can say, hey, you know what, where am I not meek? Where am I not transparent? Where am I not humble? Where am I not, serving of others, submissive to others? Where am I not these things? And they'll give you a laundry list.
Yeah. If you're having a hard time identifying your friends, well, in fact, as we talk about on podcasts, I have a bunch of forms that if you ever want to take advantage of them, please let us know. I have, when I work with people when it comes to this area, I have 2 different little exercises. One's called the transparency exercise. It's a square with 4 squares inside the square. So you divide it off, and you're supposed to sit with people, just as you were saying, Jeremy, people you love, and each one of you are supposed to be transparent. So the first one is you list, the top left-hand corner is you list the open things. These are parts of myself that I see and others see. Maybe, okay, you're funny and you're kind and all those things that everybody sees. The second quadrant is your blind spots. Those are things that other people see, but you don't. Mm-hmm. And that's how they help you. That's the third one is the hidden things. You start to list those. Those are the things that I know that my friends don't know. And that's where transparency comes in. I have to do some confessing before them. And then, of course, the last corner is the hidden ones. The unknown ones, which is, you know what, God, I don't even know these now. Search my heart. I'm having my friends pray, God, give me some insight into Gary that I don't have. I'm praying, God, show me my heart. And so as you really seek transparency, you do have to be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Because as you said going into this sounds easy, but this is some hard stuff to work through. And the second one, the form in fact, I'm going to give a form to Jeremy at the end of the show and have him do it, and then and he'll have a report a couple of podcasts from now. But it's a form called the Interviewer, and I give you this and ask you to interview 5 different people across the board, maybe a family member, maybe a spouse, maybe a coworker, maybe a neighbor, maybe if you're brave enough, even someone who you don't get along with, and you give them this series of 8 questions, and I'll read them off real quick. The first one is, name something you think I consistently do well. You're asking this of a person because you're really trying to find out about yourself, identify yourself. Tell me what you think my strengths are. Tell me what you think my weaknesses are. If you were, man, this is getting old thing. I'd take off my glasses to actually read that. If you were in a situation where you thought I could help you, what would that situation be? How would you describe me to others? That's a big one. How would you describe me to others if you knew I wouldn't know? And if I was to be totally teachable, what one thing would you think I need work on? If you do that, if you ask people that you love and or just people to give you a good core sample of who you are, you could do a pretty good meekness check. And you have to I think, like as we've already stated, you have to really want to change. I really have to want an attitude adjustment before I can have an attitude adjustment.
Yeah, and that's another part of meekness. You just said it that I forgot was in the definition that I read this morning, which was teachable.
Yeah,
and that's a big part of what you're doing there is by being vulnerable, by being humble, by being submissive, and using these forms to bring to people.
Yeah,
you're also showing that you're teachable. Because, well, depending on what you do with those forms, I guess.
Correct, yeah.
But, you're looking for weaknesses. You're looking for what people think you are, the vulnerability. But you're also looking to be taught by those things so that you can change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's a part of meekness as well, is how can I, take what people give me and have said about me and to me, that I can then take that and focus on it. To create change in my life.
So as you're talking about maybe aspiring for your spouse and your kids to learn meekness and wrestling with how much do I confess and full disclosure, that's one way to teach. But the other way to teach is experimentally and experientially. So as you become a different person, it's a great teaching tool to your children. Like, Dad used to be this, but now he's this. And so you don't have to do full confession to your whole sinful past, but they see who you were and who you become. Okay. As you become more meek, you're training them that meekness is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, and part of that is also meekness is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And change is uncomfortable. And so as you're changing and as your kids are seeing this change, you have to be willing to become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to change the way that you are. Like, for instance, my wife is incredible at she's a social worker. She's working on becoming a life coach, maybe a counselor, and she's trying to figure out just like the psychology behind people, right? And behind parenting specifically. And as we look at parenting, she's read books and she actually the other night our daughter is just sometimes terrible at night and like screams at us. I put on Facebook that I'm living the 4-year-old yelling at you at dinner table kind of life, which is the high life, which is, what dreams are made of.
Yeah.
And so my wife just read this book and is like, okay, what I'm going to try to do is that's the left brain, I think it is, saying that. So what we're going to try to do is engage the right brain. And with that, and older people, grandparents cringe at this because they're like, just spank the kid.
Yeah.
But my wife says, okay, now I'm going to engage the right brain. And what's the right brain? Right brain is activity. So she has her run around and times her on running around because she loves things like that where you time her.
It's breaking state is what you're doing.
And so she's breaking the state of our daughter. And she's running around. She says, don't you feel better? And my daughter starts screaming at her again. She says, okay, do some jumping jacks now. And does some jumping jacks. And then has her run around again. And then on her bike, she runs around the kitchen island again and times her. And then now she's not yelling anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Cool. And she's like, okay, now see how I did that? That's how we need to react. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through all that work, but
no, because the lack of humility there would say, no, that's disrespect, and I can't let my daughter talk to me this way.
And that's what I started thinking is I started thinking, oh, no, we're giving in to her whims and allowing her just to, yell and scream and do this, but at the same time, it's not her doing that. It's the mindset doing it. So I don't need to spank her and teach her respect, but instead I need to engage another part of her thing, because you know what, yelling is okay. You need to teach the respect part, but you don't do that through physical things. What you do is you break that mindset by having them run around, and then you talk to them about, hey, this is respect, this is not respectful, and that's how you get through them.
But you're talking to them at a time when they're actually teachable.
Yeah,
they're not teachable at that moment, and so you did teach them something from a different place.
Yeah, and so I think you get through a lot better there. So full circle on this story, where I'm going with it is my wife teaches me constantly how to parent better, and there's times where I am like, dang, that works. I need to start implementing it. Awesome. And there's other times where I'm like, I just want to yell louder at my daughter.
Yeah.
I'm not a spanker, but I just want to yell back at her, but that's not productive. And my wife has taught me that. So I need to be meek about it. I need to be submissive about it. I need to be serving about it, loving about it, vulnerable, and try to change. And I'm still going through that, because things like that happen all the time, where it's something I don't want to do that someone teaches me, like my wife in that instance. And I have to be teachable, and I have to be humble, and I have to be vulnerable and say, okay, you know what, this isn't the way I would do it, but heck, it might work.
Well, because the end result is the same. We think if we yell at them, that'll change them. So you're looking for behavioral change. Yelling doesn't bring that, but the new method you took did.
But sometimes it doesn't change them, because
Correct.
that's not like we talk about love languages, and we talk about soul IDs and all that we talked about in our communication podcast a little bit ago. Is that may not be the way that they hear, that they learn, that they listen.
Correct.
Same thing at work is I have certain people that I have learned and been meek about and said, okay, they don't respond to this type of a supervisor. And so, the supervisor way that I grew up was your supervisor's authority, and you just do what they say, no questions asked, and you respect them.
Right.
What I found with this new crop of worker and generation of worker is that is the thing that will turn them off the most, make them quit the fastest, and that they will absolutely hate and not be productive under. So you have to learn each one of their styles and have the humility and the vulnerability to say, okay, my way is not working. Now I need to see how they need to be served.
Correct. Yeah.
And in a certain way, as a supervisor, submit to that thought pattern and serve them differently, and have a meekness about me that says, okay, how do I get through to them so that it's effective, serving them, serving myself indirectly, and serving my company ultimately.
Achieving what you were hoping to achieve at the beginning.
Exactly, but it's not the way that I want to do it. So
Right.
I need to learn how to do it. And some people look at that as weakness. I just listened to a podcast yesterday where they're like, you know what, project managers, you are so weak, and you need to be more this and that, and not give in to the whims of people, but instead know what you want and do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the authoritative style that we're talking about, and that may work with other people within the company. I know what I'm doing. I'm very decisive about it, but it doesn't work with the people that that are in my department. So
Yeah.
I need to treat them differently than I would someone who can accept that route.
In the life coaching system that I'll be producing here pretty soon, in the communication module, there's an element that says learning how to speak to someone's listening.
Yes.
And so I have a responsibility for that, especially if the end result is you're actually making your employee better, so you are serving them. And if that's the goal, if I can make you better by me even being meeker, then it takes a strong man to do that.
And I think the old school on that is not to become meek, but the old school is, okay, you're not hearing me, so I'm going to yell louder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's how, again, I'm Italian. That's how I grew up, is I'm going to yell louder. I'm going to
If it doesn't work,
animate myself more,
Yeah.
And that's the way that I'm going to get through to you, is because I'm going to get your attention that way. I've tried that with my kids. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work at all. It amplifies them even more.
No, it stokes the fire.
Exactly. And so, it's a little off topic where I'm going with this, but what it is when you humble yourself to a new way of thinking, when you want to serve others, when you want to submit, be vulnerable, transparent, teachable, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable, it's not your normal behavior, and you're learning something that is completely different.
Yeah.
And that's why I think meekness comes in so many facets and so many parts of life, and you don't even notice it. Meekness, a lot of people could say, well, it's humbling myself and serving food to the homeless. No, it's changing who you are and how you do things,
and how you view the whole business.
and how you view it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And making a change that to yourself, your attitude adjustments. Which is why we call it that. But changing the way that you do things and changing the way that you're wired to a certain extent, to become more. To basically love people better.
Narcissism only serves yourself, but meekness serves you and others. So it's a win-win. Narcissism doesn't really serve anybody else but you, but meekness does. Because the more you understand and practice meekness, vulnerability, transparency, humbleness, you start to notice you become a different person. And you've grown, you mature. And that makes you a better person too. If you've ever coached children, I used to coach baseball, Pop Warner. And from the days when I used to play, I never responded well to the authoritarian coach. We had a coach who would walk out in the mound. I'd play center field. He'd walk out in the mound and point out to me and yell at me in front. Like, my family's up there. My friends are there.
Yeah.
If I had a coach who would take me over by the water fountain, put his arm around me and said, "You know what you did wrong, right? Okay, I know you can do better." That motivated me. It was up to him to figure out how to speak to my listening. And that does take humility. It does.
And it also takes a strong person to really know how to serve people, and not just serve people like we've identified. It's not just serving someone at the homeless shelter, because that's what your church ministry is, or it's because it gets you brownie points with, with a college or something like that. But serving people is really a lot different than the way we think.
Again, the title of the series is Attitude Adjustment. So attitudes are based on your belief system, how you look at something. So if I take Thursdays out of my important day to go down and serve those poor, unfortunate, homeless people, that's not humility. That's not meekness. That's still a branch of my narcissism. Serving people means I want best for them. John Maxwell used to be a pastor. Now he's a leadership guru. Again. Yeah. So as we identified him, but he talks to. I've been to some of his webinar telecasts that are posted everywhere, and he said he was telling managers to go down to the people that they work under them and be real with them and transparent. And he said that most people are afraid to do that. He said, you're afraid to show them your weaknesses. He goes, guess what? They already know that you have weaknesses. They're just excited to know that you have them. He said it changes the dynamic. Now they know that you're serving them because you've made yourself real. I know we just talked off the air about the example Jesus, humility and service work hand in hand, and we'll talk about humility in a minute. But Jesus came not to be served; he came to serve.
Yeah.
God, who came down and put flesh on, that reincarnate, that just, carne is flesh, chili con carne, chili with meat. Well, Jesus is God with meat on, and he came down to serve. Amazing. What an example. There, no smell of narcissism in that.
Yeah, and I think, service, when it boils down to it, service is putting others before yourself.
Yeah.
Not because you have to, not because...
Correct. Good point, yeah.
Not because you're told that looks good, but that's just your way of doing things. And being real at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not just putting others before yourself. It's like really having a relationship with those other people and putting them before yourselves.
Charles Swindoll used to be I don't know if Charles is still alive or not, but he was a pastor of a giant church in L.A., Promise Keeper star, wrote tons of books and radio shows. And I remember watching on YouTube a show where he brought a service where he brought a lady up on stage, like 70-something years old, who had worked in the nursery for 40 years at that church. And he said, very few of you know her name. He says, but I'm convinced that when I stand and get rewards in heaven, she'll have more than I. Because some of my rewards were the adulation of your people, the people who bought my books. And she served humbly and in an isolated place and never wavered. He said, what a strong woman this is.
Yeah.
That's what real service is.
Well, and it's also what humility is. Humility at its core is putting others before yourself. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we're selfish people, I think. Even the best of us.
Did
are
you say I
people.
think or I know?
Well, some of us, some more than others.
That's okay. I'm all right with that.
But like when I go home, I want to rest.
Yeah.
Humility is playing with my kids. Humility is putting them first. Humility is, and I need to do this better too, is putting my wife first and letting her rest. When I want to be resting.
No, good point.
Humility is when you want to do something and you put someone else's needs and desires above your own.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can do this so much better. If we get up in the morning with that attitude, like we've talked about, where who can I serve today? Who can I encourage today? Who can I put first today?
Who can I show love to today?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think if we start with that in mind, we're more apt to do it. And I know I've said that before, but we're supposed to humble ourselves before God, first of all. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. I remember that verse in that song.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to humble ourselves, and then we will be lifted up because of that, it says. But we shouldn't be focused on being lifted up. We should be focused on the humbling ourselves before God.
Yeah.
And humbling ourselves before God is humbling ourselves before the people that He created as well.
Yeah.
And I think those two go hand in hand. I can't cite specific scripture where it says that, but I believe that humbling yourselves before others, and as Jesus said, it's the least of these.
Yeah.
When He's talking about that, He's talking about the people who put themselves on the bottom so that they can lift other people up.
Yeah. That's the parable Jesus told about when you go into a banquet, you don't sit at the top and then someone comes and tells you to move. You sit in the back and someone says, here, take the seat up here. You automatically go to the back and someone will reward you or elevate you, but you don't elevate yourself because, that's the upside downness of the kingdom. Yeah. The paradox that to be first, I'm last, and to be great, I'm small. And that's the kingdom mindset. So we always like to end with some takeaways. And I think Jeremy just gave him some in those questions. I have a series. I don't do them every day. Probably 3-4 days a week. I do these personal affirmations. I get up and I read them only to get my mind prepared. We talked a couple of podcasts ago that if I called you up at 4 a.m, said, yellow Mustang, yellow Mustang, yellow Mustang, and then hung up, you would think I'm nuts. but you'd be surprised how many yellow Mustangs you see on the way to work because your mind's prepared. I ask myself these questions a few mornings every week. They're more affirmations as opposed to questions. Like as I give out love and respect, I increase the likelihood of giving love and respect. Now I'm in a mode to look on how do I love and respect someone. I will be fully who I was created to be today. That takes away narcissism and makes me want to be. I'm created to serve. I will find the positive in everything. My heart will be full of gratitude today. If we got the sense of what it means to be grateful, it would be hard to be narcissistic.
Yeah.
And then lastly is I will have compassion for others today. So I program my mind as a takeaway for myself. I program my mind every day to be on the lookout for these things, because left unchecked, I probably won't do that.
And that's really what it comes down to is, as we talk about being meek, the things that we can do is constantly put others first, constantly seek after putting others first. In the morning, throughout the day, looking for places where you can put others first, looking at places where you can serve others, where you can maybe be vulnerable with other people, where you can be teachable, being able to not look at every part of life as I know what I'm doing, and more so, what can I learn today?
Great.
That's
a very reframing question.
Yeah. Or what can I learn about myself? What can I learn about my job? What can I learn about my spouse? What can I learn today? What can I, who can I lift up today? Who can I encourage today? Who can I pray for today?
Who can I empower today? Who can I equip today?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we can do tangibly every single day. It's just a matter of really focusing on having that be your mindset every morning, and waking up and kind of putting that on when you wake up and say, I need to put this mindset in effect as of right now, and really put it on for the rest of the day. And when stuff starts coming my way that's taking me off that mindset, recalibrating yourself to that mindset. And that's hard.
It totally is. But that could be a morning prayer that says, God, adjust my attitude towards meekness today.
Yeah.
It's something as simple as that.
And honestly, I've said it, that it's the vulnerable part of me is I suck at this,
Just being transparent.
Yeah. It's not so much the humility, but it's when the fires start coming that I have to put out, when the people start coming at me with problems or with insults or things like that. I don't want to be humble. I want to be even. I don't want to say, hey, I understand that. How can I help you? I want to say, you know what? Go away.
Do your job.
Do your job and shut it.
That's your pie hole. Yeah.
But that's.
But
just
if it was easy, everybody'd do it, right?
Yeah, and so I think we all need to do this.
Correct.
Getting back on track, we all need to do this through the morning, through the day, recalibrating. When we get off track, and really seeking out this principle of life. Jesus says that those who are meek are going to be blessed. And I think that we will see those blessings, maybe not the way that we want to monetarily or, with rewards like the narcissist, but we will feel fuller in life, and we will feel more fulfilled and complete because of it. And we might see other things happen too. We might see relationships blossom. We might see friendships grow. But I think what we need to do is really seek after that.
And when you do, you've increased the likelihood that you're living like a kingdom lifestyle.
Yeah. And so as you seek out that kingdom lifestyle, as you seek out that principle of meekness, we would love to hear how it's going. You can do that in a couple different ways. Facebook.com/RP podcast. You can get on there, right on our wall, send us messages, etc.
Request those forms.
Yes. Also, we are on Instagram at RP Podcast, and then on Twitter at the RP Podcast. And you can always check out any of our podcasts, any of our previous discussions and dialogues on there at rppodcast.com, and you can hear everything there and get in touch with us there as well. That's not easy to say either. So anyways, we are glad that you were here. We're glad that you listened. We hope that we hear from you as well as feedback, and we hope that you have a great week, and we will see you next time.